Good afternoon, YTPC friends. Please take a seat. My grandmother's rocker is ready for you, and I wanted to take a few minutes this afternoon to cut a video. It's not the best of conditions. Here on my porch we just had a tropical storm come through here, and it dumped, quite a few inches of rain, and we had some fairly heavy winds, and I hope that all of you who had people who were affected by this storm from the Florida Peninsula on up, even beyond North Carolina, I hope everyone is safe. I've been trying to track down YTPC people that I know and make sure they're okay, and even those I don't know. I hope that you came through okay. I did fine. I did have a large tree that blew down on my property, but it blew down in a place where it didn't end up affecting anything other than I've now got to get rid of it. But other than that, it's everything came out well. I can't complain. I am a little bit raspy today because I've been battling a fairly severe cold. But still, if you can bear with that, I wanted to come out this afternoon and have a smoke with you. Hope that you're doing well. A little windy out here, so keeping my pipe lit might be a bit of an adventure. I am smoking my favorite type of pipe, which is a Savinelli 320. This happens to be my Domaliti model, and I love the stem on this pipe. It's sort of that coffee type of stem. And speaking of coffee, I have my 8 o'clock coffee, the other requirement that I have to have in order to smoke and enjoy it. In the background, you may hear some rain. It's still drizzling, but our power was out for about 24 hours, so I was smoking and reading by candlelight the last 24 hours. But it kind of takes you back to the old days when that happens, and so I got through it okay. And in a way, it was kind of peaceful, actually, to live by candlelight as people used to do before we had everything had to be powered by electricity. And as often happens when I am confined without electricity, and often when I am confined with electricity, a story came to mind, and I thought I would share that with you today. And I hope that you will bear with me. It has some tentacles, it has some pieces to it, but it involves my grandfather, who I call Papa, and a man named Joe Adcock. It involves the Polo grounds in New York, and I will tell you how all of those things are related. First of all, my papa was a postal carrier. Pop carried mail for most of his career. It was not till the very end that he actually got a truck. The rest of the 40 years or however many years he carried mail, he was on foot. He slung mail bags, carried mail bags. Excuse me, the cold still with me. And so he was a very, very strong man. In his younger days, he had a bit of a temper. So he could sling mail bags and human beings as the situation called for. So my papa was very dear to me. My grandma and grandpa lived less than 2 miles away, and I was their first grandson. And as I said before in a video, I spent a great deal of time with my grandparents and my grandpa. Well, I'll begin by telling you that Papa was a huge baseball fan, and it was him who got me interested in baseball. We talked baseball. That's what he called it. He called me Doc. Now, the reason he called me Doc was not because he knew I was going to have a PhD one day. he called me Doc because Pop had sore legs, probably from carrying mail. And one of the things I would do was I used to spread some stuff on his legs that would ease the pain of his legs. And so he said I was his doctor. And so he always called me Doc. He hardly ever called me David. It was mostly Doc. That's what I became known as. And ironic that one day I would actually become a doc, a real one. Well, no, not a real one. The real ones are medical doctors. I'm one of the useless kind, the kind with the PhD. But anyway, Papa, as a mail carrier, every once in a while, the Postal Service would send some of their best carriers to a convention somewhere in the United States. I remember one time him talking about going to Seattle. Now, he didn't fly. He had to go on a train to get to these places. So I remember him at one point talking about taking a train up to New York. Now, I would guess that probably it is unusual for you to know exactly where your grandpa or grandma was on a certain afternoon on a certain day, certain date. It doesn't happen very often. Well, I can tell you where my papa was on April the 30th, 1953. And I'll tell you how I know. Papa was in New York for this convention, and he went out to the Polo grounds. Now, those of you who are baseball fans already know that the Polo grounds they were polo grounds. They were not meant to be, it was not meant to be a baseball field at all. But it was. It was turned into one once polo became less popular than baseball. And so it was shaped like a football field, but wider and longer. And essentially what they did, if you can imagine a football field, the very back of the end zone being home plate, and the other end of the field being the center field bleachers, and everything to the left and the right, being left field and right field. Well, the distance to the left field and right field bleachers or seats was very short. And if you were a pull hitter, that was your paradise, unless you were facing someone who could outpitch you. But if you were a straight hitter, if you hit to center field, you had a problem, unless you could get one by the center fielder and they had to run for 2 days to get the ball. Well, Pop decided to go to the Polo grounds to see a game. Now, here's where some tentacles start to come together. In the Polo grounds, they had, at the time Pop went, they had put some bleachers in center field. There didn't used to be bleachers out there. It used to be open, and there were two fairly good-sized doors where they used to bring equipment in and out, but they decided to make those into bleachers. Okay? Well, above those set of bleachers in center field was a sign. And the sign said, "Always buy Chesterfield cigarettes." It was a huge sign, and in fact, I can show it to you. This is what it looked like. Now, you tobacco people know that Chesterfield was originally a Virginia company, but it was bought out and for a while was produced here in Durham, which is just a few miles away from me in Hillsborough. And I know where the old Chesterfield tobacco warehouses are. Now they've been turned into condos. So there was this huge sign above the bleachers. Now, the estimates are that it was somewhere around 480 feet from home plate just to the bleachers. Okay? Bear with me. Now, the Chesterfield sign was above that. The reason I mention that is when Pop was there on April the 30th, on that afternoon, to see the baseball game. I don't know exactly who the Giants were playing. I think there's a way I can probably look it up, but I haven't done it yet. So anyway, Papa went to the Polo grounds. He settled down in his seat, he got into a conversation with a guy sitting beside him. And this guy told him that the night before, Pop had really missed a tremendous event. He said that a player for the Milwaukee Braves named Joe Adcock had hit a home run, not just to center field, but had hit it over the Chesterfield sign, all the way over. Now, if the center field bleachers were 480 feet away, estimates are that to hit one over that sign, which there's no real report of it. Now, there's a story that Adcock did hit one to the sign. Now, whether or not it went over the sign or not, I've never been able to determine, but Papa said it did, and I believe it. Or at least the guy sitting beside him said it did. And this card of Adcock that I have, I pulled from my baseball collection, is a 1961 card, which is the year I was born. Now, again, this happened in April. This was April the 29th. This was 1953. Now, Adcock, you may or may not have heard of Adcock. He was a tremendous player. The problem he ran into was that there were other tremendous players on that team. Among them, Hank Aaron, Warren Spahn was on that team. Matthews was on that team. There were several great players. And Adcock sort of fell into the mix, and I don't think ever got the consideration that he should have. He was 6'2", 220, the exact size of my papa in his prime. Now, Adcock was not only known for his baseball skills, he was also known for some other things. For example, one time he was plucked a couple of times by a pitcher. He didn't take kindly to it. I don't know what the pitcher said, but apparently said something to Joe. I don't know if he talked about Joe's mom or what, but anyway, Joe takes off for the mound. The pitcher quickly gauges the chances of Adcock stomping a mud hole in him in front of the New York Polo Grounds crowd. And the assessment revealed that the chances were pretty good. So this pitcher took off the mound, Adcock in pursuit. Adcock chased him into the dugout, down the tunnel, and actually into the Giants clubhouse before they could finally subdue him. And I said earlier I didn't know who the Giants played. It would have had to have been the Braves, obviously, because that's who Adcock played for. But anyway, that was one thing. He also had a very humorous, practical joke side that he sometimes would display. There was a little shrimp of a player named Albie Pearson. He played with Adcock and, in fact, roomed with him. And Adcock was always on Pearson about his size. He was a shrimp. Well, one night after a game, Pearson came back to the room to find Adcock laying in Adcock's bed, but his bed was gone. And what Adcock had done was to have Pearson's bed removed, and he had actually pulled out the bottom drawer of the dresser in the hotel room and made a bed for Pearson in that lower drawer. Excuse me, still recovering. So he did have a sort of practical side to him. But anyway, this is how I know where Papa was. And again, on that sign was the advertisement for Always Buy Chesterfield. And on eBay, I happened to come up and saw this picture, which is of Bill Dickey and Mel Ott, who are two Hall of Fame players. And you'll notice at the bottom, this was a real advertisement from, I don't know, I guess based on their age, I would say this would have been the 40s, probably. This advertisement, this was actually taken from a magazine at the time. This is not a reproduction. This is an actual page from a magazine that was framed. And so, I guess on rainy days like this, I wax nostalgic, and I was thinking about my papa and Joe Adcock and tobacco signs in center field in New York in 1953. And just enjoying some memories. And I appreciate you being so patient as to let me reminisce on this Sunday afternoon on my porch. I didn't tell you what I was smoking. This is Shelby Foote blend. It's 2/3 Edward G. Robinson and 1/3 half and half. And I got this blend from 2 a.m. Pipe on the Patio, the recipe for it, and I mixed some up, and it's very good. Shelby Foote was a famous American historian and writer. If you ever watch Ken Burns' Civil War series, you know about Shelby. He was featured in that. He lived in Tennessee. Passed away, unfortunately, 2 or 3 years ago, I believe it was. But he was also a prolific writer. If you're interested in the Civil War, have never read his 3-volume history of the Civil War, I would suggest that you maybe want to pick it up. You can pick it up now for fairly cheap. But it is voluminous. It is not a beach read. It is not a quick read. It is fairly thick, but I can assure you is well worth the time. So, communicate with me spiritually and tell me how things have been for you. Hopefully you were not too affected by the storm. If you weren't, then how has your week been? Your weekend? I know my friends in the UK have had a lot of rain recently. Maybe that's not totally bad because they've also been battling heat and drought, I understand, for a good bit of the summer, and so hopefully that eased some of the water restrictions I think they've been under for a while. I hope it eased that. Well, I'm going to keep this video short. And again, I really appreciate you letting me sit out here and tell a story about grandpas and Joe Adcock's and Chesterfield signs and the Polo grounds and things like that. I can often retreat into memories like that. When you live alone, it's more prevalent. But when I'm with you guys, I'm not alone. So I very much appreciate you stopping by. If you've not subscribed to my channel, I don't often say this, but if you have not, I would appreciate if you think this is something worthwhile that you will subscribe. It means a lot to me to know that there are people who find what I do on this channel, which isn't much, I realize, but at least you find some solace in it and are willing to subscribe. If not, if you just want to stop by, you don't have to subscribe. I welcome you, whether you are a subscriber or not. And if you know others who might like a channel like this, then my grandmother's rocker is always open. I leave you this afternoon with a genuine wish that you will have a great day, a good week coming on, that wherever you are, that your loved ones are safe, that you're safe, that you're enjoying your pipe smoking, enjoying your tobacco. And as always, I end this with thanks for the company. Have a good day.